Welcome there. Thank you very much for joining me today on our 31-day vision challenge. We've been running a vision challenge from the 1st of January 2021 and it's running for the next 31 days. So the last one will be the 31st. And every day I discuss an aspect of vision or things that would help us fulfill our vision or not fulfill our vision, some of the things that we have to lay aside and some of the things that we have to deal with to enable us fulfill our vision. So today I want us to talk about, to fulfill your vision, you must persist even in the face of failure. So to fulfill your vision, even in the face of failure, you must persist. Even if you've had experience of multiple failure, you must persist. A lot of people, because they failed once, they give up. Because they failed twice, they give up. Some even go as far as, because my father failed, or because my mother failed, or because my friend failed, so that means I would not do this particular thing because I assume that automatically I'm going to fail. Because my neighbor has failed, I am also going to fail. So, but I want to tell you today that you've got to quit making excuses. You've got to quit playing the blame game. You've got to quit trying to look onto different things or just thinking the fact that because I failed before, it is impossible. I don't want to do it again. I don't want to be in this position, so I am not going to do it again. Even though you know that God has called you and even though you know what God is asking you to do, but because you failed over it before, you don't want to do it. Walt Disney had to file for bankruptcy 7 times before Walt Disney became Walt Disney. I mean, if you look at Thomas Edison that created the light bulb, he goes on to say that I have not failed, but I have just found 10,000 ways that will not work. So even though he failed 10,000 times, he's saying that is not failure. Because in the end, he did produce the light bulb. But he's saying that even though people may say that I failed 10,000 times, in my mind, it is not failure. In my mind, it is the fact that I found 10,000 ways by which the light bulb would not work. So even though you have failed at something, it doesn't mean that you should quit. And a reporter said to Thomas Edison that, how do you feel about the fact that you have failed 1,000 times? And Edison replied, he says that I did not fail 1,000 times. The light bulb was an invention that required 1,000 steps. So I didn't fail. It's something that required 1,000 steps. So you may class it as failure, but somebody else classes as steps. You may class it as failure, but somebody else will class it as learning curve for them. So what you are classing as failure, you've got to change your mindset around failure to see to it that it's not failure. He goes on to say that great success is built on failure, is built on frustration, and is built on catastrophe. He goes on to say that Albert Einstein did not speak until he was 4 years old, and he could not read until he was 7. But yet the world, probably looking at those kind of statistics, would say that he's retarded or he's got some disability, but then he goes on to do exploits. So don't let the fact that you have failed at something stop you. The Bible goes on to say that 7 times will a just man fall, but 7 times will he rise up again. God will rise you up. If God has given you the vision, it does not matter. He will help you to fulfill it. This morning, I want us to look at the man at the pool of Bethsaida, and that can be found in John chapter 5. And I want us to read John chapter 5, verse 1. It says, after there was a feast of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Now there is in Jerusalem by the sheep gate a pool, which is called in Hebrew Bethsaida. This had 5 porches, and in these lay great multitude of sick people, lame, blind, paralyzed, waiting for the moving of the water. For an angel went down at a certain time into the pool and stirred up the water. Then whoever stepped into the pool after the stirring of the water was made well of whatever disease that they had. Verse 5. Now a certain man was there who had been in infirmity for the last 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there, this is the bit I wanted to focus on. When Jesus saw him lying there, he knew that he already had been in that condition a long time. So he said to him, do you want to be made whole? Do you want to be made well? Then the sick man answered, Sir, I have no one to put me in the pool when the water is stirred up. But while I am coming, another person steps down before me. Jesus said to him, rise up, take up your bed and walk. And immediately he began to walk. Jesus never asked him for excuses. But many of us are so good at making excuses that even when success stares us in the face, even when the very thing that we ask for is staring us in the face, we cannot see it. We're still making an excuse. So this is a man that's been lying there in infirmity for the last 38 years. And he's been sick and he's lying there. And he's waiting for the water to be stirred up by the angel. When the angel stirs up the water every time, somebody falls in and that person is well. And he's been lying there so long for the last 38 years. And he claims that he's been looking for healing. And he claims that he's been waiting for somebody to get him into the water. But all he had been doing was practicing excuses. Because when Jesus comes, this time Jesus is not sending somebody to stir up the water. An angel is not coming. Jesus comes himself. You don't need to roll into the water. Jesus is not asking the question to all the multitude of people that were lame or sick over there. Jesus came to him specifically and spoke to him and asked him the one question: do you want to be made whole? But he began to give an excuse. I mean, we have got so used to excuse, because the more you give the excuse, the more practice you get. And if you're not careful, you're going to keep making excuses and excuses and upon excuses. And majority of the time as well is because of failure. The excuse that I'm going to fail, so I will not even try at all. But you've got to close the excuse jars. You've got to seal it up and stop making excuses. Stop practicing the excuses. And if God has spoken to you about it, you have got to take the reins and begin to take control of it and let it happen. Yes, you will stumble. Yes, you will fail along the way. But I believe that you will be successful in the end. I mean, I was reading this quote to do with Michael Jordan, and he puts it right. He says that I have missed more than 9,000 shots in my career, and I have lost almost 300 games. He says 26 times I've been trusted to take the game's winning shot, and I missed. He said, I have failed over and over and over again in my life, and that is why I succeed. So the man talks about all the failure, but he's telling you that all these failures that he did drove him to success. Failure will drive you to success. And so you cannot say that because I've failed, or because I'm afraid that I'm going to fail, or so I'm not going to prevail, or because others have failed, so I'm not going to prevail. Or my father did exactly this. My father tried to go into business, he failed. My mother went into business, he failed. She failed. My older brother tried it and they failed. My uncle has tried it and they failed. Some people give so much excuses that the excuses do not even necessarily pertain to them, but they will make the excuse. But I've come to encourage someone that quit making the excuses, because if God has given you that vision, he will see to it at all costs that you will succeed. Don't give yourself the permission to live a substandard life. Don't give yourself the permission to live a substandard life. Don't give yourself the permission to live a life of mediocrity. Don't give yourself the permission to live a life that is not what God has called you to, a life that others want for you. Don't give yourself permission to live a life that God hasn't given to you. You cannot fit a big vision into a small life. So you've got to challenge yourself. Stop making excuses and begin to challenge yourself and rise up. You can do more. You can do better. You can get back up. Yes, I fell, but I'm coming back up. You've got to fight your way back to the top. You've got to fight your way back. Give the devil a run for his money. I want to encourage someone that you will give the enemy a run for the money. What God has in store for you, eyes have not seen, ears have not heard, and neither has it entered into the heart of man. You have the power to do more than you can ever imagine. You've got the ability to do more than you can ever imagine. You've got the resources to do more than you can ever imagine. You saw the widow that came to Elisha and said, my husband, your servant has died, and the bond men have come, take away my son as repayment for his debt. He says to her, what have you got? And she says, I've got nothing but a jar of oil. He says, and it was that jar of oil that was used to, the miracle came from the jar of oil. What have you got? You've got everything that you need on the inside of you. Don't let the fear of failure knock you out. Don't let the fear of failure kick you out. Don't let the fear of failure stop help you. The world is waiting for you. The world is waiting. Many lives and many destiny are dependent on us fulfilling our vision. Arise this morning and begin to fulfill that vision. Don't let failure limit you. Begin to pray over your life. That Father, in the mighty name of Jesus, though I may have failed a few times, though I may have failed 7 times I'm rising up. May you help me to rise up in the name of Jesus. Let me rise up. I may have failed. My father may have failed. My mother may have failed, but I refuse to fail in the name of Jesus. I will arise up in the vision that you have given me. We see Saul, the battle that David fought with Goliath was never for David. It was the Saul's battle. And Saul was terrified when Goliath was screaming and shouting at them and undermining God. No one was bold enough to go. David, the little boy, stood up and went. He was not afraid of failure. He was not afraid at the fact that Saul had failed and his older brothers were in the army and they had failed to rise up to the challenge. He rose up to the challenge. May you rise up to the challenge. Every vision that God is giving you, may you rise up to it. And you will not fail. You've got to speak it over yourself that I will not fail. Even when I fail, I will get back up. Even when I fail, I will rise up. Even when I fail, I will refuse to stay down, because God has got so much in store for me. If God has given me that vision, I will make it in the mighty name of Jesus. Beloved, we've come to an end of today vision challenge, and the theme was to fulfill my vision. I must persist even in the face of failure. May God richly bless you, and as you pray over your life, that you will step out of failure. You will step out of the fear of failure. You will step up from under the bondage of failure. Failure is a bondage. You will step out from under it in the name of Jesus. And even when you fail, you will learn out of your failings in the name of Jesus. You will learn out of your failure. You will see failure as steps. You begin to see that every time I fail, it takes me, it educates me, I learn from it, and then I move up to the next step. So you will see failure as step, and failure is nothing that you will be terrified about. Failure does not mean that God never called you to the vision. Failure does not mean you will not succeed at the vision. Failure does not mean that God is not with you. Failure does not mean that it was not God that showed it to you. God has shown it to you, and you will successfully make it. God spoke over David that he was going to be king. Do you know how many times David failed? David failed many times. He did things that were not pleasing to God, but he quickly went back to God. So the fact that you failed in something does not mean you have not been called to it. May God richly bless you this morning. May I hope you've been empowered and inspired by the word that I brought you today. Please share the video with someone and invite them to join us tomorrow. May God richly bless you in Jesus' mighty name. Take care. Lots of love.